On this Wednesday night, taking Canada's pulse during the pandemic.
People who are living in urban and suburban areas are more fearful.
From mandatory face masks to whether you'd get a vaccine, our exclusive poll on Canadian attitudes. Ontario's new rules for in-person visits to care homes.
She's still asking, why am I not coming up to see her?
As the Premier promises again to build new long-term care homes and renovate old ones. New charges, the Canadian police officer and his son accused in the murder of a suspected Liberian warlord. And a monumental replacement.
It's an amazing feeling.
The new statue symbolizing hope in an old slave port.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. It's now well established that wearing a mask, especially in indoor public places, reduces the risk of spreading COVID-19. And tonight we have a sense of what Canadians think about it. According to an Ipsos poll conducted exclusively for Global News, most Canadians support making mask wearing mandatory, though it depends where you live and there's an urban-rural divide. 80% of urban dwellers say they support mandatory masks, compared to 67% of Canadians who live in rural areas. Canadians have so far done a good job at limiting the spread of the virus, but numbers are creeping up in some places, and we only have to look south to see how bad things can get. Abigail Bimman has our top story on Canadian attitudes to public health rules.
Masks on during this couple's grocery shop.
I think we're all in.
Them. Yeah.
As we get older, I think I'm in.
Turns out they feel the same as most Canadians. New Ipsos polling done for Global News shows 79% support mandatory masks in public places. Support is highest in Manitoba and Saskatchewan at 84% and lowest in Atlantic Canada, just 64%.
I think everybody's feeling safe because of how easy we've had it compared to, America or some of the other parts of Canada.
People who are living in urban and suburban areas are more fearful and are more desirous of things like wearing masks or potentially closing down again than people who live in rural areas.
The virus is still in the community.
Living in rural Manitoba, virologist Jason Kinderchuk understands that divide, but says everyone needs to be aware there's still a risk. And he says that risk still exists outdoors, even though Ipsos found people are far less likely to leave their mask on outside.
Yes, there's some data to suggest that outdoors there's less risk. But we have to understand that ultimately we have to remove that ability of the virus to be able to transmit. And if we put people in close proximity, that's what's going to happen.
Close proximity, like at this Toronto restaurant. An investigation is now underway. In Montreal, COVID-19 test lineups last hours. Public Health asking anyone who's been to a bar since July 1st to get one. There have been at least 30 cases linked to 9 bars.
I don't think there's any social distancing happening.
And as companies around the world, including Canadian ones, race to create a vaccine to eradicate COVID-19, Ipsos found 72% of Canadians support making vaccinations mandatory.
I think that's the way to go. And that's the reason why we keep saying, and the government keeps saying, until we get a real effective vaccine, we have to continue maintaining these measures.
Experts we spoke with are cautiously optimistic we could see a vaccine in 2021. Meanwhile, the Ipsos polling shows 77% of Canadians believe a second wave will hit their community before then, in the fall. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Calgary and Banff are considering making mask wearing mandatory in indoor public spaces as the number of new cases in Alberta keeps creeping up. More than 40% of the province's active cases now are in Calgary. The mayor has warned the city could make masks mandatory in all public indoor spaces if more Calgarians don't start wearing them. The province is distributing millions of non-medical masks, and Alberta's chief medical officer of health strongly recommends wearing them. In Banff, Town Council has asked for a bylaw to be drafted that would require visitors to cover their faces in the downtown area and in enclosed public spaces. The draft bylaw isn't expected to be brought back to Council until early August. Residents in long-term care homes have endured social isolation for months now. Today, Ontario announced limited indoor visits to care homes with no COVID-19 cases will be allowed as of July 22nd. There's also a promise to help beat the sweltering heat in care homes with no air conditioning. Premier Doug Ford has said the long-term care system in Ontario is broken, and today he pledged again to spend $1.75 billion to build multiple new facilities and renovate old ones. It's the same thing he promised 2 years ago and didn't deliver, and it's led to thousands of people suffering. Caryn Lieberman reports.
From the sidewalk across the street from Eatonville Care Centre in Toronto, Michael Swance visits his 93-year-old mother.
She's still asking, why am I not coming up to see her?
The last time they hugged was 4 months ago.
It's tough. It's been tough.
With the province relaxing the rules for visits to long-term care homes, Swance may finally be able to see his mother face to face.
They're going to be outside on the patio, which is fine.
No matter where you live, you and your loved ones should have access to top-notch long-term care.
With that, Ontario Premier Doug Ford reiterated a nearly $2 billion investment in the sector to build new beds and upgrade old homes with features like air conditioning.
The buildings themselves really, in many cases, need significant investment. And we've seen that in things like having ward rooms. 4 people in a room divided by a curtain with shared bathing facilities, sometimes upwards of 20 people using the same bathing facility. No one wants to live like that.
Especially during a pandemic when most of the province's COVID-related deaths have been linked to nursing homes. The Canadian Armed Forces was deployed to 5 long-term care homes with severe COVID-19 outbreaks in Ontario in April. And in May, the military released a damning report outlining major issues at each one of them.
That's right. It's you and me.
Rose Riley O'Hara's 103-year-old mother is in long-term care. She says the problems are not new.
And every government in the last 25 years has dropped the ball on it. I mean, they've looked at them like they were disposable human beings.
Staffing is shorthanded, where you don't have the right mix of people, and when old buildings are in focus, it gets worse.
In Quebec, the chief coroner ordered a public inquiry into deaths in long-term care homes and private seniors' residences.
We really are needing some national standards so that each province and territory can live up to what every Canadian would want to have for their older relative.
For Michael Swance's mother, who he says survived COVID-19,
give her another package of Oreos.
It starts with a long overdue visit. Caryn Lieberman, Global News, Toronto.
In the United States, it's now clear the lack of public health restrictions and reopening the economy too soon is killing people. New cases are surging in multiple states. In Florida, it's situation critical. More than 10,000 new positive cases of COVID-19 were reported today, and more than 112 people died. As Jackson Proskow reports, it's going to get worse because intensive care wards are flooded with sick people.
Florida's hospitals are in critical condition, facing wave after wave of COVID-19 patients, stretching ICUs beyond capacity at more than 50 hospitals in the state.
Unless you're as close to it as we are, you really don't understand how serious it is.
Leah Carpenter is both a nurse and a hospital CEO. With her ICU overwhelmed, she has had to convert an auditorium and classrooms to handle the influx of patients.
When you look at there being 10,000 new cases today, 15,000 cases on Saturday, do you worry about what's coming down the pipe?
Absolutely. I worry about it. I'm not really convinced that our numbers have even reached what they could be.
Florida's reluctance to lock down and refusal to mandate face masks has come at a heavy cost. More than 300,000 cases, nearly 10,000 hospitalized.
We still haven't been out of the first wave, and the cases keep growing, they keep growing.
Nurse Dana James says she's never seen anything like it. She's frustrated by efforts to downplay the severity of the pandemic.
We hear a lot from political leaders who say, well, look, the average age is coming down or the death rate has stayed low. I'm just curious what your response is to that.
Let's not just talk about the death rate. Let's talk about somebody who's not going to die, but is on a ventilator for months and months.
In recent days, the state's death rate has set new records, along with the daily number of new cases. Despite the governor blaming young people for spreading the virus, doctors say the patients showing up in hospital are increasingly older.
In the last couple of weeks, we have seen an enormous increase in the number of patients who require mechanical ventilation that are in their 60s and 70s, similar to what we saw back in March.
This time around, there are far more patients, and there's far less certainty that the virus can be reined in. Florida has vowed not to move backwards on its reopening. The frontline workers are left to brace for what comes next.
What I'm probably most concerned about is what's to come. Are we going to get control of this? Are we going to level it out?
Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Back in this country, the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet, is denying a sexual assault allegation made against him that dates back more than 20 years. The anonymous accusation, which includes graphic details of the alleged assault, appeared on social media. Our Mike Armstrong is looking into this, including why the claim is coming out now. Mike?
Well, Donna, there's sort of been a wave of accusations made online and anonymously in recent days against several Quebec celebrities and public figures. Blanchet is the first politician. The accusation was posted last evening on a Facebook group. Hyenas in Skirts calls itself a feminist collective that pushes for change through disruption. In it, the writer recounts a night of bar hopping in 1999 where she ended up in the bathroom of an after-hours Hells Angels club with, she says, Yves-François Blanchet. She alleges he groped her, tried to undress her, offered her cocaine in exchange for oral sex, and then masturbated in front of her. The Bloc Québécois issued a statement this morning responding to the post. It says Blanchet, quote, unequivocally denies the alleged acts and invites the person who published the allegations to file a complaint to the proper authorities. The 55-year-old Blanchet has been the leader of the Bloc since January of last year. Prior to that, he was in provincial politics as well. At the time of the allegations, 21 years ago, he was a music promoter. He was managing one of Quebec's biggest stars, Éric Lapointe. The Facebook allegations say Lapointe was there the night in question. Global News has reached out to both Lapointe and the person who posted the message. The claims have not been verified. As to why she waited so long, she says she kept it bottled up for years until yesterday when she realized who Blanchet was and that he was in politics. Donna?
Mike Armstrong in Montreal. Some of the world's wealthiest people and corporations have been targeted in a massive and brazen cyber attack. Hackers took over dozens of Twitter accounts, including those of Apple, Uber, billionaires Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk, as well as former U.S. President Barack Obama and current presidential candidate Joe Biden. Their accounts were used to post Bitcoin scams, tricking people into sending more than 200 money transfers, adding up to $100,000. The tweets were up for only a few minutes, and Twitter says it is investigating. A heartbroken mother and father consumed by grief.
We'll never stop fighting for you.
Coming up, the message from the parents of Regis Korchinski-Paquette. A judge in Minnesota has allowed the media to view police body cam video of the final moments of George Floyd's life, though news organizations are not allowed to publish it. Those who have seen it say it shows Floyd pleading with the officers in the minutes before his death, telling them he's not a bad guy as they try to wrestle him into a squad car. A few minutes later, Floyd is face down on the street with Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes. The video confirms Floyd's last words were, "I can't breathe." Today, Floyd's family filed a civil lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis and the 4 police officers charged in his death. The wrongful death suit cites a lack of proper police training and a culture of racism with bad behavior within the department.
The city of Minneapolis has a history of policies and procedures and deliberate indifference when it comes to the treatment of arrestees, especially black men.
Lawyers for Floyd's family say the lawsuit seeks to set a precedent that makes it financially prohibitive for police to wrongfully kill marginalized people, especially black people, in the future. There is an update tonight into the investigation of the death of Regis Korchinski-Paquette, the young black woman who fell from the balcony of her Toronto apartment building. Lawyers for her family say the Special Investigations Unit is now in the closing stages of its investigation, and a second autopsy is being done outside Ontario. The 29-year-old woman fell from her family's 24th floor apartment building on May 27th. Before it happened, the family had called police, and officers were in the apartment when she fell. The exact circumstances surrounding the final moments leading up to Korchinski-Paquette's fall have not been released. Today, her mother and father shared how they are feeling.
I just want to tell my daughter I love her very much. And we'll never stop fighting for you till the day I die.
I'm grieving. I'm devastated. I'm a little angry. That's my daughter.
On July 25th, a public memorial will be held in Toronto, followed by the first annual Walk for Justice in her name. Still ahead, the man now charged in the murder of a suspected Liberian war criminal in Ontario. A man named Bill Horace lived in Canada for 18 years until he was murdered in London, Ontario, 3 weeks ago. One of his alleged killers has now been arrested and charged with second-degree murder. And the victim's past has caught the attention of the international community. As Mike Drolet reports, Horace is alleged to have been a notorious warlord accused of terrible crimes in Liberia.
One of Canada's most wanted is now in police custody. Caryn Gregory is alleged to have murdered a man in a home invasion in London, Ontario. Gregory's father, Toronto police officer Trevor Gregory, was also arrested for breach of trust. It was a shocking crime on a quiet street that immediately gained international attention because of the identity of the victim. 44-year-old Bill Horace, an alleged Liberian war criminal. Police believe his murder is related to business dealings in Canada, not his alleged past, which journalist Michael Petru exposed in a 2010 Maclean's article.
Some of the allegations made against Mr. Horace involved murder, involved sexual violence, some of which was of a nature that I and my editors didn't feel comfortable committing to print.
So how was the man known as General Bill allowed to stay in Canada, much less enter it in the first place? His dossier in the Canadian court system is extensive. Horace arrived in Canada in 2002 and was given a departure order, but he appealed, and in 2005 was found inadmissible because of war crimes. He filed and lost appeals in 2008 and 2009 before attempting to stay on humanitarian grounds. Again, he lost, but didn't leave. In 2015, he asked the courts to order the government to give him permanent residence. That too was denied, and Horace was in the process this year of trying again. What is clear from court documents is that Canadian authorities didn't believe his claim that he was a chaplain when he arrived as a refugee 18 years ago.
Once the guy was in the system did identify him. So that worked. He was ordered removed, yet was never removed.
250,000 people died in the brutal 1990s conflict. Hassan Biladi has tried to bring the perpetrators to justice and says he collected witnesses to Horace's alleged crimes, which he gave to Canadian war crimes investigators in hopes Horace would be deported.
This was mind-boggling, and I was just like shocked. You know, I had my mouth wide open, and I was like, what? This is Canada. Come on. I mean, beacon of human rights, justice. Come on, it's Canada.
Biladi says many in Liberia were sad to hear about Horace's death because he says they wanted justice where his alleged crimes were committed. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
You can read more about Bill Horace and the charges against the man accused of killing him on our website, globalnews.ca/globalnational. Mexico wants the Canadian government to extradite a former investigator involved in the case of a group of missing Indigenous students who are believed to have been murdered. Tomas Zeron is accused of manipulating the probe into the disappearances and tampering with evidence. Mexican authorities say he's now in Canada. They met with Canadian officials this week to discuss the extradition request. Canada's Department of Justice told Global News it could not comment on the request until it's made public by the courts. In 2014, 43 students were traveling back from a protest when they were seized by local police, then allegedly turned over to a drug gang and killed. The original investigation concluded their bodies were burned at a garbage dump, but that claim has been discredited. A new clue emerged last week with the identification of a bone fragment found in a ravine. We have much more about the case of Tomas Zeron on our website, globalnews.ca/globalnational. Next, the statue swap in England with a monumental message. The Black Lives Matter movement has led to a rethink all over the world about the people we choose to commemorate. Statues of men once held in high esteem are being toppled in lots of places, including in the UK. Today in Bristol, England, a new statue replaced an original one. And as Redmond Shannon reports, the mayor says it must come down, but locals seem to approve of it.
A fist raised high, the Black Power salute over this former slave port. This new installation replaces the statue of slave trader Edward Colston. His ships transported 80,000 people into slavery in the Americas. It stood here for 125 years until protesters tore it down last month and threw it into the harbour. And it was on that day that activist Jen Reid climbed the plinth and inspired a local artist, Mark Quinn.
To me, that was immediately crystallised into a sculpture. And I thought perhaps this brilliant moment that she'd created herself could be crystallised.
And how apt that here in the home of Banksy, that the statue was installed early on Wednesday morning without the permission of the city.
It's an amazing feeling. It's really exciting.
Reid worked with Quinn over the past month to make it happen.
He's really captured it so well. You know, for me, getting on that plinth, you know, I raised my fist, and I raised my fist to give power back to the people, back to the slaves who died at the hands of Colston. I gave power to George Floyd.
Richard Powell has lived in Bristol all his life. He came down to witness what he calls a piece of history.
For some people it'll be quite objective, but I think the majority, as we demonstrated with taking out that previous statue, that most people in this city would agree that things have to change.
Quinn says it will not be a permanent installation, but if enough Bristolians continue to sing its praises, Reid's salute could stand here for some time to come. Redmond Shannon, Global News, Bristol, England.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this dog taking a stroll near Winkler, the largest city in Manitoba's Pembina Valley. Lovely scene. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to us. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.